Hey, Eric Bischoff. Thanks so much for joining us on WTOP in Washington, D.C.
Hey, I haven't been to DC in a while, so it's great to be there digitally anyway.
Yeah, we'll welcome you virtually. Well, so our listeners know we're talking to you because, you not only are you the longtime, legendary face of WCW and WWE, you host the 83 Weeks podcast. Everyone check that out. But the real reason we're talking is you have a new book called Grateful out. I believe it comes out later this fall, but the pre-sale is happening now. So tell me about, the idea to do your second autobiography. You did Controversy Creates Cash in 2006. And is the idea of this one covers everything that's happened in your life after that?
It's exactly it. Exactly it. It's funny when I was approached to write a book when I was in WWE, which ultimately became Controversy Creates Cash. I was like, really? What would I talk about? And in the process of doing that book, and it ended up on the New York Times bestseller list for a hot minute. But the process of doing it was really interesting. And going back and remembering things and putting together, details and really trying to recreate a picture in that much depth really opened my eyes. And then subsequently, about 2 years ago, not even that, a year ago, I was approached by Guy Evans, who wrote a great book, The Incredible Rise, The Inevitable Fall of Ted Turner's WCW. Amazing book. He reached out to me and said, hey, I've been following you a while and listening to you and your podcast. I think you got a lot to say. Would you consider? And I thought the same thing. It was like, what the hell would I talk about? But again, that process revealed a lot to me. It made me see things and realize things that I probably was just a bit self-absorbed to otherwise.
Oh, absolutely. And there's so much stuff that, maybe stuff that you tackled in that first book that we can, maybe double back and get to later in this interview. But I guess tell me about Grateful. I guess since it's post 2006 career, I guess this covers what your recent WWE return, some TNA, even a little AEW, and then I guess personal life stuff too, right? Why you're grateful. It covers the career and the personal stuff.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the business side, the professional side of my last 15 years, and it does pick up where Controversy Creates Cash left off. When I got done with that book, when I was done with WWE, I really, really believed my career in wrestling was over, and I was happy about it. I was ready to kind of take on that next chapter of my life. And lo and behold, I end up back in it. So from a business perspective, yes, it does cover TNA, a lot of TNA in ways I haven't discussed before. Same with going back to WWE as an executive for 4 months. Talked a lot about that and what I learned about myself, especially, over that period of time. But most of all, in reflecting back the last 15 years, I really realized for the first time, and the book kind of takes you on that journey of the revelation, for me at least, that, while I did what I did because I'm an entrepreneur and I'm competitive and I'm an aggressive personality and I like money and blah, 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 blah. I'm just like everybody else. No different.
All true.
But I was running so hard and so fast that I didn't realize the impression some of the things that I was doing was making on people. Mm. And I won't take you through the whole book, but it all started with a young lady in Phoenix, Texas, who told me a story about her and her dad and growing up and losing her dad and needing, I'll cry if I even say it, and needing someone to walk her down the aisle at her wedding.
Oh my God.
And I went, okay, I know I did this for the fun and the money and all the other stuff that everybody else does stuff for, but damn, that made a difference. And over the past 15 years, there's been not maybe as dramatic examples of that, but a lot of examples of things like that. And every time something like that happens now, and part of it is because learning to be grateful has taught me to look for those things where I kind of didn't. But it's just opened up my eyes to just how much impact some of the things that I did or was involved with affected people in a positive way. And that made me more grateful than the money and the fame and the travel and the ego and all the other crap. Still appreciate that. Don't get me wrong. I'm not putting it down. I love it. But I love the other side of it too.
Right. You realize the grateful is more important than the controversy and the cash. And man, we're
You
only like
can't
five.
really. Here's what I learned. I don't mean to cut you off, but what I really learned along this journey, and my wife has been banging on me for this like for 40 years. She's wise beyond her years. But once I started recognizing all the things around me that I have to be grateful for, everything else got a lot easier, brother.
Oh, I bet.
It's
I
like
bet.
doors opened up, relationships opened up. It's like, there's something to this stuff.
Absolutely. Well, there's something to what you're saying because we're only 5 some minutes in and you already have us both tearing up. Come on. You made us choke up. Oh, I'm not crying. You're crying. All right. Well, whenever I have someone on, I love to tease what they're talking about, but then if possible, I always like to hit pause and I'd love to move a little more chronologically, set the stage and then wrap it back around to what you cover in the book. If
you do whatever you want, man. I'm just here for the ride.
All right, let's ride. All right, so you're born in Detroit in 1955, something like that?
55, yeah, 55. Older than dirt.
Oh, that's Rebel Without a Cause year. Great year. Marty, a bunch of good movies that year. All right, so so that means that you're probably, I guess, in your 30s-ish, 31 when you started AWA under Vern Gagne in 86. And I guess then Ted Turner hires you at WCW in 91, Great American Bash, the rest is history. But talk about, that early period of, breaking into the wrestling biz. How did this guy with the famously great head of hair get into the wrestling biz?
Probably only because I had a great head of hair. Vern Gagne was bald. I think he lived vicariously through me, or at least through my hair.
Yeah.
It was really a coincidence. I've always been an entrepreneur, which means I've always been a salesman, one way, shape, or form. Everything is sales. I'm stealing that from Sean Pendergast over at CBS Radio, by the way. Everything is sales, and I was pretty damn good at it. And I had a meeting about an opportunity that had nothing to do really with me involved with wrestling, where I wanted to do some marketing with Vern Gagne. And somewhere along the line, that initial meeting turned into, hey, how'd you like to come to work for us? And I learned, I didn't even know what syndication was. I was told by Mike Shields, who's no longer with us, but he said, hey, Eric, well, Vern wants to hire you. He wants to put you in syndication. I said, that is amazing, because I didn't aspire to have a job in the wrestling business. Right. It's not what I took the meeting for. I never even thought twice about it. I'm a wrestling fan, yeah. Watch it on TV, yeah, but never tried to get a job in the business.
Right.
But he said, yep, syndication. I went, great, I'll take it. Didn't even ask him how much money. And then I went home and I told my wife, and she goes, oh, that's awesome, honey. What's syndication? Oh, damn. I don't even know.
Right.
But I found out. I learned on the job. They knew I didn't know anything about it. Mike Shields knew, and he really mentored me and taught me what the television industry was all about and how it worked. And that's how I started, and basically ad sales and syndication.
Wow. Thanks for sharing that. That's great. I didn't even know what syndication was. All right, cool. And then obviously, like I mentioned, Ted Turner hires, brings you to WCW in 91. Bill Watts resigns in, I guess, 93. So you take over as vice president of wrestling operations, and you start.
Not quite.
Not quite. Fill it in properly.
93 Watts left, and Turner Broadcasting decided, okay, we got to treat this WCW thing like a television company, which means we need an executive producer, somebody that can kind of herd the squirrels and keep this train on the track we want it to be on. And I put my name in the hat, and over a period of time, I ended up getting that job. I didn't become vice president until sometime afterwards.
Gotcha. And once you actually do, when they actually, you sort of become sort of, I guess in charge of more or less WCW creative stuff. Talk about all the initial things you started doing to up the production value. Tell our listeners where you moved the studios to a famous spot in Orlando, and a certain famous wrestler happened to be filming a film down there.
Yeah, well, as executive producer, I really wasn't in charge of creative. Typically, an executive producer would be, but in WCW and Turner at that time, it was divided into two components. One is the physical production of the television show. I oversaw that. The creative was handled by a division called Wrestling Operations. They didn't call it creative.
Right.
Wrestling Operations. And when I first started, Dusty Rhodes was really the guy that was in charge of creative. So all I had control over was where we produced the show, the graphics, the lighting, the audio, anything that had to do with the physical production of the show.
Right.
It, again, wasn't until afterwards when I kind of merged and took everything over. But while I was in charge of the physical production of the show, one of the things I had to do was manage my budget and manage the quality of the product. Up until that point, WCW had been traveling all over the Southeast, producing their shows in arenas, so they had a live audience, but they couldn't draw flies. I mean, it was horrible. You couldn't give tickets away. Winos wouldn't even come for free wine. It was just horrible. And it was expensive. So I started looking into producing the show at Disney MGM Studios, because if you shoot it properly and you plan accordingly, it can actually reduce your production costs and really increase the production values, because now you're shooting inside of a soundstage that's actually built for television production.
Right. You're not taking a touring thing on the road. It's a central location, right. Not to mention Disney.
Yeah, you're not going to some arena where they have horse shows on Sundays and wrestling on Mondays.
Right.
You know?
They have mouse shows at Disney.
Yeah. So I moved the production of our syndicated shows, because I knew what they were by then. I moved the production of those shows to the Disney MGM Studios. And coincidentally, Hulk Hogan was filming a show called Thunder in Paradise there. Now, this is 1994, late 93, early 94. So through Ric Flair, I had a conversation with Hulk late one night. He called me like at 1 or 2 in the morning. I was sound asleep.
Hey, brother.
Hey, brother. Hulk Hogan here. Like, he had to tell me who he was. Like, I wouldn't recognize his voice. Right.
Got to speak in the third person.
But yeah, that's how the relationship kind of grew from there.
Wow. That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, it paid off. I guess pretty soon you'd be turning a profit for the first time in the company history, I think. And you up the number of pay-per-views. I think at first, it was like, only a couple big tent poles, WrestleMania, WWF, that kind of thing. And, Great American Bash, whatever, WCW. But you go, I guess, to monthly eventually. And then also you started a little thing called the Monday Night Wars when you started WCW Monday Nitro to directly rival WWF Raw. I guess the first.
You hit on 3 really good things there, and you're covering a lot of ground. I'll try to talk faster.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, I did increase the pay-per-views, and we did end up making profit for the very first time. But those 2 things were connected, because the only revenue that WCW could really increase upon quickly was pay-per-view revenues if you kept adding them,
right?
Because they were a cash cow.
Right.
On a low end, we could take home $2, $3, $4 million on a bad one.
Right.
So that was my first big move. But as we're starting to, okay, wow, we're increasing WCW, profitable for the first time since Ted Turner bought it. Yeah. His entire executive committee wanted him to pull the plug because nobody believed it could ever make money. And I validated Ted Turner, which is probably why I got a call in 95. And Ted said, Eric, what's it going to take to become competitive with WWE? And I said, because I didn't come there for that conversation. I was there to sell Ted on let me distribute shows to China.
Right.
And Ted said, what's it going to take? And I go, Ted, they're in prime time and we're on Saturday nights at 6:05 Eastern, 3:05 Pacific. We can't be competitive ratings wise. And then Ted went, okay, give Eric 2 hours every night head to head with Monday Night Raw. So, I mean, Scott Sassa, he was the president of the networks. Harvey Schiller, my boss, we're all shocked. And I walked out there and said, okay, this is going to be sink or swim. I'm either going to make this work or I'm going to die trying, professionally speaking.
I love it. And a legendary show was born. Like even on that first one on September 4th, 95, I guess you're like in the mall and people are coming up the escalators. It's great stuff. But you had Lex Luger come out to interrupt Ric Flair and Sting, and he confronted Hogan in the ring during the main event. Macho Man's out there, and people are like, wait a minute, wasn't that guy just on WWF? And I bet you a lot of people started changing the channels over as you're luring away, Vince McMahon's top stars. I mean, how big was that to you to start bringing in some of those guys and create this like, whoa, wait, I thought they were on that program, but now they're here?
Yeah, I mean, that was all about creating kind of spontaneity. That's one of the things that we learned in, preparing to launch Nitro. We did a lot of research with focus groups all over the country. Lapsed wrestling fans, current wrestling fans, fans that only watch WWF, fans that only watch WCW, fans that watch both. And we'd ask all these different groups, these probably 15 different cities or more, what they liked about professional wrestling, what their expectations were, all kinds of things that we wanted to find out, what their feelings were about the product. And that research is what helped me shape Nitro, because one of the things that came out consistently anywhere in the country amongst any of those disparate groups was they like surprises and they like spontaneity. As much as they like action, they love those two elements as well.
Yeah.
So Lex Luger was a great opportunity to right out of the bat, get people talking, you know, have a nitroglycerin type moment there, a spontaneous combustion, something that nobody expected, and controversial, hence the name of my first book.
Exactly. And then that obviously dovetails perfectly into the creation, your genius creation of the NWO, because Scott Hall and Kevin Nash show up as, the outsiders at first. And then, once you turn Hulk Hogan heel, they form that iconic badass trio with, and I'm sure as a production element guy, doing the black and white entrance video with that wah, wah, wah theme music and taking us into the control room. Talk about, how you really with that faction changed the business and blurred the lines of, reality and scripted TV.
Well, I think the reality and scripted TV, that portion of it, reality and scripted. I mean, everybody recognized wrestling as a scripted form of entertainment.
Right.
Athletic as it may be, it is what it is. And I wanted to find a way to kind of blur those lines so that it wasn't so apparent that it's scripted. In other words, I wanted people to feel, because when you forget that you're watching something scripted and you just get sucked into the story or the characters, it doesn't matter any longer emotionally, whether it's real or whether it's not.
Right.
You feel it. And I that's what the NWO was all about. It was unpredictable, it was spontaneous, and it was different than anything else that was on television at the time. And I think that's one of the big reasons it worked, is because we got lucky. Timing is everything. Best idea in the world doesn't work if it's the wrong time for it.
Yeah.
And vice versa. But everything just kind of clicked.
Yeah, I think the audience in mid-90s was ready for that anti-hero kind of thing. The old baby faces where heel dynamic was over. They wanted to root for the cool heels kind of. And
what's interesting is because that coincides with the way the audience was enjoying television, movies,
pop culture in general.
All of a sudden we're dominated by badass bad guys that you just couldn't help but wish you were one of them, and that's our culture. We're still seeing that to this day, right? I mean, we kind of root for the anti-hero. We want to see that badass that we really wouldn't want our daughter to date, but man, it'd be fun to go out and have a beer with them.
Yeah, hey man, you sort of helped, you paved the way and invented it before the Tony Sopranos and Walter Whites. You helped sort of usher in that as anti-hero.
Well, in wrestling, I think that's a fair
wrestling,
statement. In wrestling, yeah.
But it wasn't just
certainly being done in television and movies.
Right. But it wasn't just the cool heels. You had to do the other end of that, which, you built up like a monster baby, like Goldberg. And then you also invent the cruiserweight division for the Rey Mysterios and the Dean Malenkos and Eddie Guerreros, etc. So speak to those two things really quick. I mean, everyone always talks about NWO, but I need more people need to give you credit for A, the cruiserweights, and then B, some of the big babies you built too.
Yeah, I think that's the thing people have, asked me over the years, what are you most proud of? And I think the thing I'm really most proud of, even though NWO's, what everybody else talks about the most, the cruiserweight division and the impact the cruiserweight division has had on today's product, anybody that denies it is kind of delusional, because it really is so apparent. Because when I created the cruiserweight division, the big challenge I had internally, I'm talking about with my own roster, was what the hell are these little guys doing on TV? They're too little. They're not wrestlers. How much could he bench for us? He only weighs 145 pounds, and you're putting him on TV. People thought I was nuts.
Yeah.
And it had been done before on a limited basis, but not giving them the crossover middle portion of a primetime show and giving them their own division. But if you look at today's product, you look at AEW and even to a lesser degree, but WWE, that cruiserweight influence, the Luchadors, the Rey Mysterios, the Chris Jerichos at the time, Eddie Guerreros, Dean Malenko, Chris Benoit, all of those guys changed the audience's appreciation for their style of wrestling.
Yeah.
And look what you see to this day. Yeah, I think one of the biggest problems today is everybody's gone too far with that style.
Right.
And it's just kind of watching like Olympic quality, gymnastic floor exercises. But nonetheless, the athleticism and the impact that those guys in the cruiserweight division had on the industry as a whole, I think is understated.
Right. So well said. It's probably your lasting legacy of all of it. All right. Well, so with all of that, you're beating the pants off of Vince and WWF for a famous 83 weeks, as the podcast says. But what would you say would have been what caused then, the highest highs, fly close to the sun, whatever analogy you want to use? What caused the downfall of WCW? Was it NWO getting too diluted? Was it the finger poke of doom? Was it Jeff Jarrett laying down for Hogan, Vince Russo coming in and you going out? Like, what would it be? A combination?
It's a combination of two very specific things, actually, and they're both tied together. But one is WWE, after having gotten their butts kicked for 83 weeks. And even before that, we were really competitive with them right out of the chute. Right. It was neck and neck from day one. Okay. It wasn't until 96 that we just started eating them alive every Monday night. But after about a year of being eaten alive and being embarrassed and quite honestly, quite a ways behind WCW at that time in terms of, weekly ratings, Vince decided, okay, that formula works, because up until that point, WWE was a teen and preteen rated show,
children's show,
kind of like it is today.
Yeah,
it was very, very soft, and unlike today, because the characters today are more reality-based characters in many respects. Still, some very animated, cartoonish type characters, but for the most part, they're more of a reality type of a character, even though they're whatever.
Yeah.
But at that time, it was all Doink the Clown and the psycho dentist and
the occupational
IRS agent. It was all like human cartoons.
Yeah.
And I went the other way. I went for 18 to 49-year-old men with the NWO and other things. And Vince, after getting beat for a year or more, went, okay, we're going to do what they do. Let's just do what they do, but let's do it more. Let's get a little raunchier. Let's get a little edgier. Let's get a little more dangerous. Let's do things nobody's ever done before. Because that's how I got to where I was. That's where I got to where I was.
Right.
But Vince was smart enough to see that and go, okay, we're going to do what they're doing, only we're going to turn up the volume. And they did. Well, while that shift in strategy was occurring in Stamford, Connecticut, back at Techwood offices in downtown Atlanta, the TBS headquarters, there was a merger going on. There was a lot of changes happening. And as a result of that merger, in all of the demands of it and the way things were being restructured to maximize that merger, WCW ended up in a real bad spot. So did, by the way, a lot of other companies in Turner Broadcasting at that time. A lot of them. Right. It wasn't just WCW. At that same time, I had an executive come in that told me one day, hey, I got called into a meeting, 15 people in a room I'd never met before, all sitting around and telling me how I was going to continue to produce WCW. They didn't even watch the product. They didn't know anything about it. Didn't know anything about the audience, the history, the market, nothing. But I've got a guy who is a very senior official now at Turner saying, here's what I want you to do. I want you to make your show family friendly. Okay, now picture this. I'm making money hand over fist.
Yeah.
I took a $28 million a year company and turned it into a $350 million company in a course of about 36 months.
Yeah.
And now I've got a guy that doesn't even watch the product or know anything about it, telling me how I'm going to change and no longer do what I did to get to number one. Mm-hmm. I'm going to change and go back to doing the things that the guy that I beat for over a year used to do and is no longer doing.
Right.
What the hell? So it was Vince going, okay, I'm going after that market instead of that market. And it was Turner Broadcasting in the most, I don't know, ignorant fashion possible, going, no, we're going to go after teens and preteens. which means I had to change the creative completely.
Right.
And it was just a mess. On top of that, there were a lot of internal financial and structural changes being imposed upon us that I had to fight for over a year during the process of that merger.
Wow. Yeah. And you mentioned, that's a great point. You mentioned that the society and Vince jumped in that direction, which you had already been going, which was society itself was going into, Jerry Springer, Howard Stern. It was reflecting the culture, and you saw it early and Vince saw it a little after you, but that's the way it was going. In addition to that, did you sort of keep a side eye over and look at some of these amazing superstars that they were building in the Attitude Era? Like, did you see Stone Cold and The Rock and The Undertaker and Kane and Triple H and Mick Foley? Like, were you just like, uh-oh? Like, you see the Rock speak, or you see Austin versus McMahon and you go, uh-oh.
I mean, sure. I mean, as time went on, now you're talking about now into the 2000s with Rock becoming a superstar.
Late
Austin
90s, early 2000s. Yeah.
But the real pivot point where I really took notice was when they brought in Mike Tyson, when WWE brought in Mike Tyson.
Yeah.
I knew that was going to work, but I had no idea that it was going to work as powerfully as it did, because that decision to bring in Tyson and the way they used Tyson to set up Austin and McMahon was pure genius.
Yeah.
That was pure genius.
Yeah.
And that's what launched Steve Austin. Up until that point, when Steve first got to WWE, he was the ringmaster. He was another kitty wrestler, right?
Right.
Now he's Stone Cold Steve Austin. He's chugging beer, flipping people off, and kicking the boss's rear end.
Yeah.
That changes everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. I took great notice of that.
Absolutely. And it was just for us, the fans. I mean, come on, man. I was in middle school and high school during this whole thing we're talking about. It was perfect. It was great to have both the competition. Obviously it drove you each to be better, but do you think were there any times that either side went a little too far? Either Vince doing like the Billionaire Ted spoof, or you guys dropping a women's title belt in the trash, or Mick Foley that'll put butts in the seats. Mick Foley, was there anything, or was it all's fair in love and war?
All's fair in love and war. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I love the Billionaire Ted skits. Ted loved them. Ted laughed at them. He took a videotape of it up to his office, and everybody's nervous. I don't know what Ted's going to think when he sees this. I mean, he's Ted Turner. He's kind of like one of the biggest moguls in the entertainment industry. And now they're making fun of him in a wrestling show. Oh my God, we're going to get yelled at for this. And we plugged it in. Ted laughed his ass off. Thought it was great.
Yeah. Do you wish in hindsight you would have let DX in the Turner building?
Oh, but look, I didn't prevent them from coming in. That's another, BS narrative put out there by, wrestling faux journalists.
Right. Set the record straight.
Otherwise known as fanboys.
Right. Mark.
But no, I was in the middle of the ring on a live television show when they came to the door. I heard about it as it was happening in my IFB with a microphone in my hands out there performing in front of a live television audience. So there was nothing I could do to go out there and let them in or prevent them from coming in. That was a decision that was made by Doug Dillinger, head of security. And it was the right decision because he wouldn't possibly know what was going on in my mind. And what if things went bad? And because you remember how they came in with a Jeep with like a fake machine gun on it. You gonna let them in the back of your arena?
No, it was like a tank on a Jeep. Yeah, a cannon.
Oh my goodness. Can you imagine that thing driving through Baltimore right now? That thing wouldn't make it 3 blocks. It would be shot up.
It wouldn't have. I'm trying. What other, I feel like we've covered. Well, the other major flashpoint we have to talk, of course, is the Montreal Screwjob and Brett making WCW hands on the screen. Do you think Vince went far in that, or if it was, would you have done something similar? You think?
Here's where people that like to have opinions on things like this really need to just take a minute, step back, and go, okay, I've got to view this from 2 different perspectives, and then see which one I identify with.
Right.
Vince didn't know what I was going to do. All he knew was what I had done in the past. Like having one of his talents, or who he thought was his talent, end up on my show without telling anybody, dropping the women's WWF championship in the garbage on national television, calling him out for a fight,
giving away results,
giving away finishes to his tape shows. all the crazy stuff I did to get to be number one, that's all Vince knew of me.
Yeah.
What Vince didn't know is that because of litigation, we were being sued by WWF at the time for copyright and trademark infringement. There was a mandate from Turner Legal to me that basically said no references in any way, shape, or form to WWF or WWE intellectual property. So he didn't know I was going through that though. Vince didn't know.
Right.
I did. So when Brett and I talked about that and the belt, because, Brett was concerned that, losing right before he came in was going to hurt his positioning. I said, man, it doesn't matter. You're Bret Hart. Whether you have a belt, whether you have 3 belts, really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because you're Bret Hart, and we'll start from square one.
Yeah.
So I could care less. I said, okay. Vince didn't know that. So Vince was preoccupied with getting that belt off of Bret before I could figure out a way to convince him to put it in a box and ship it to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I would have done it if I was Vince with the only information that Vince had at that time. I don't blame him for making the decision he did. He could have gone about it differently, but he had to get the belt off, and there was a lack of trust there and a concern about what I would do or not do.
Yeah.
From my point of view, like I said, it didn't matter to me. But, put yourself in someone else's shoes and ask yourself, what would you really do? You probably would have done what Vince did.
That's such a great way to put it. And then, so after all this back and forth, all the bad blood ratings battle, we all see something we never thought would happen. You finally show up on Monday Night Raw after, Vince bought WCW. Talk about, Sarah, what was it like stepping out there and, I'm back, that great theme song. What was it like doing that? And do you think it came a little too late? Because the invasion angle was cool and all, but it would have been cooler if they could have got you and all of the people that were sitting out their contracts to come in.
You know what was funny? They tried a year earlier to get me to come in for that angle.
Yeah.
And I turned them down. I didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
Now I didn't know it was for an invasion angle. They didn't tell me anything.
Okay.
I got a call from Jim Ross one day because he was head of talent relations. He said, Eric, boss would like you to come in and talk to you about doing some stuff on TV. We need you to come in and we need you to be ready to go on Monday. I said, Jim, it's Thursday. We haven't even talked about money. We haven't talked about what do you have in mind, Jim? Well, can't talk about it too much right now. We got to kind of, get you in here and, get you in front of the boss and, see what happens. I said, Jim, I got friends, and it's over the 4th of July weekend. It's my wife's birthday. I got friends and family coming in from all over the country to hang out here in Wyoming with me. Surf Wyoming, by the way. I said, Jim, I can't. No, thank you though. See ya. And somehow that got back to Vince, and I'm sure Ross didn't put it in because Jim and I weren't that tight back then. We are now, but back then I was he didn't want me to come in. So I'm sure Jim gave him some version of me saying no. And I said, okay, well, that's over with. And a year later, I got called in. But yeah, it would have been nice if they would have give me a little more time so I could plan my life a little bit and tell me what the hell they wanted me to come in for. I'd have done it. Whoops, hold on. Yep. Can't believe I did that. It's not like I have a podcast or anything.
I know. Well, we're going to tease that pretty soon because Zoom is giving us the proverbial go home. I think we got the 5-minute warning. So yeah, we'll catch everyone up to the present then. So obviously WWE, you're there. They induct you in the Hall of Fame. You're in and out sporadically, like you mentioned. TNA, AEW. What do we learn in the book from that recent period here of bouncing around between those companies?
About 12 years of material that we weren't able to discuss here because Zoom's telling us we got to go home.
But they got to pick up the book.
There's a lot to cover. Yeah, you got to pick up the book. But I think, look, the book is about wrestling. I don't want anybody to think I'm out here trying to become a life coach or, Tony Robbins or anything like that. But it is a really honest kind of look at my life because I've had some amazing professional highs financially, in every way you can measure. I've made billions of dollars in this industry. I've done well for myself. I live in a beautiful home. I'm okay. But there's been times during that 15 years where not doing so okay.
Yeah.
I never hit rock bottom, as they like to say, but I bounced off of it a few times, and that and the revelation and just realizing how important gratitude is and how that affects your life in every other way. That's also what this book is about. And really pointing out very specific stories and interviews with individuals. That's the other cool thing about this book. We're going to have a QR code at the end of every chapter. So if there's somebody we're talking about, if I'm talking a lot about you and our relationship in chapter 1, there's going to be a QR code and the reader can take their phone and they're going to get an interview from you. And we're going to hear your perspective on that chapter.
Wow.
Never been done before. So we're going to be doing that.
Always innovating. Eric Bischoff, always on the
cutting
cutting
edge. I have
edge.
to, man. If you get out of bed in the morning and you're not trying to think of something to do that's never been done before, I'm not sure why you do it.
I agree. Well, we invite all of our listeners, everyone watching this around the world even, to check out Eric Bischoff's new book. It's called Grateful. It comes out later this fall, but you can it's on the pre-sale now. So order a copy. And then definitely, final seconds. Also want to invite everyone to check out the 83 Weeks podcast. Speaking of you being ahead of the curve, that you and Conrad Thompson, I believe that might have kicked off this entire wave of all these wrestling podcasts. I don't know if you were the first, but
no, it was really Bruce Pritchard.
Oh, you're right. Something to wrestle. Yeah.
Before you go, if we do want to pre-order, go to bischoffbook.com. And if you pre-order, the book comes out November 11th, 2020, this year. But if you pre-order, you're going to get an autographed version of the book from both Guy and myself. So that's why you want to pre-order now.
And plug the podcast real quick.
Podcast, 83 weeks. Yeah, I was number 3. Bruce Pritchard was number 1. Tony Schiavone was number 2. I was number 3. But I'm the most entertaining by far and away.
As you can tell from this interview alone. Awesome.
Yeah, well, you'll get an idea of what the podcast is about. I tend to get in the weeds a little bit.
Awesome. No, are you kidding me? We eat up those weeds. We can't wait to hear all about it in the book. Again, it's called Grateful. Eric Bischoff, thank you so much for taking so much time for us. This was a blast to talk with you.
Hey, it's been my pleasure. Anytime, brother.
All right. Take care of yourself.
See ya.
All right. Bye.